Lesson number 62 is about square roots, higher order roots, and evaluating using plus or minus. Now our first question says, use a calculator to determine to 5 decimal places the square root of 18. Now before we do that, what type of number is the square root of 18 if we look at which subset of real numbers? Well, it must be an irrational number because the square root of 18 is not a perfect square. It doesn't give us a whole number answer. Let's go ahead and solve this problem. So we'll go to our tools, we'll go down to our math tools, and see we've got lots of different things we can work with here. Let's use a calculator. Here we've got the calculator, and we want to use the calculator to determine to 5 decimal places the square root of 18. So with this calculator we've got to write in 18, and then we hit SQRT, means square root. Square root of 18, here we go. 4.242641. So if we want to get that to 5 decimal places, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, we're going to decide, is this last pair of numbers closer to 40 or 50? Are we rounding up or down? And since that last number is a 1, we must round down. So our answer is going to be 4.24264. Now for our lesson, next class, you're welcome to bring your calculator. You could keep it in your bag for any questions like this, or we've got calculators in class that you're welcome to use. Let's look at our next problem. Use a calculator to determine the 2 square roots of 10 to 4 decimal places. Now that's interesting. It says the 2 square roots of 10. Because 10, there's 2 different ways we can multiply to get to 10. Let's look at one of them. Let's say 10, we're going to take the square root. Oh, there we go. Square root of 10 is 3.162278. So to 4 decimal places, 1, 2, 3, and 4. 7 is greater than 5, so we're rounding this 2 up to 3, because 27 is closer to 30 than it is to 20. So let's write that out. 3.1623. Well, that's one of our answers. There's another number that you can multiply by itself in order to get to 10. Do you know what it is? Well, hopefully you said negative 3.1623 approximately, because a negative times a negative gives us a positive. So whenever we're looking at square roots, we've got to remember there's going to be 2 possible answers, the positive version and the negative version. Now, let's put our calculator away. We don't need it for the next question. Without a calculator, determine between which 2 consecutive integers the square root of 10 lies. So this one we don't need an exact answer. We need to determine between which 2 consecutive integers, we don't need this in, because it's just 1 integers, the square root of 10 lies. Consecutive, that just means in a row. So an example would be like 1 and then 2, or we could have 9 and then 10. Those are consecutive numbers because they're one after the next. So the square root of 10, well, we know the square root of 10, we just solved it. It was 3.1623. So the square root of 10 is about equal to 3.1623. I believe that was right. I'm going to double check. Yep, looks good. You should have that in your notes already. So we put about equal to because we rounded this decimal because it's an irrational number. But what we know that the square root of 9 is equal to 3. And we know that the square root of 16 is equal to 4. So if we know the square root of 10 is 3.1623, then the 2 consecutive integers that it lies between would be 3 and 4. So that's what we would write for our answer, 3 and 4. Because those are the 2 consecutive integers that this answer lies between. Let's look at our next examples. Without a calculator, determine the following. Well, the third root of 8, that just means what number times itself 3 times equals 8? Well, that must be 2. 2 times 2 times 2 equals 8. So the third root of 8 is going to equal 2. Now notice, this has to be a positive 2, because if we had negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2, that would be negative 8. So that wouldn't be the right answer for this question. When we have third roots of positive numbers, we'll only have the positive answer. What's the fourth root of 81? Well, that just means what number times itself 4 times equals 81? Well, that must be 3, because 3 times 3 times 3 times 3 is definitely equal to 81. And I knew that because 3 times 3 is 9, 3 times 3 is 9, and I knew 9 times 9 was 81, just like you know the same thing. So the fourth root of 81 is 3. Now we have the third root of negative 27. That means what number times itself 3 times is equal to negative 27? Well, we must have a negative number, because a negative times a negative times a negative is a negative, and it's got to be negative 3. Negative 3 times negative 3 times negative 3 is negative 27. And we've got our final answer. These are examples of higher order roots, because they're not square roots or second roots anymore. We've got third, fourth, back to third. We could keep going higher and higher if we would like. We've got one more example today. Here we want to evaluate negative 2 squared plus negative 3 squared, and here's a new symbol. This means plus or minus the square root of 4. And we use this plus or minus to remind us that the square root of 4 could be a positive 4 or a negative 4. So let's solve. We've got the negative outside, so 2 squared is 4, and we've got a negative, so we get negative 4. Plus, now the negative is on the inside of the parentheses, so negative 3 times negative 3, that's positive 9. And then we've got plus or minus the square root of 4, that's 2. So we get plus or minus 2. Now this question now becomes two different questions because we have plus or minus, so we have to do it twice. The first question would be negative 4 plus 9 plus 2, because we're going to do the plus first because it's on top. Then our second problem would be negative 4 plus 9 minus 2, because the minus has to be done as well. So negative 4 plus 9, that's 5, and 5 plus 2 is 7. So we've got our first answer. Negative 4 plus 9, that's still 5, and 5 minus 2, oh, that's 3. So we've got our second answer. It's really important when you see that plus or minus sign that you go ahead and make sure you find two answers, because there must be two possibilities. Lesson practice will be on page 255. Make sure you've got your notes complete, and I'll see you during our next class.